Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. You're here with me, Michael Dean. I'm back with Sarah Stannard for a second sort of part two, second edition of our conversation. The first episode that we recorded with Sarah, which we did just before Christmas with the intention of launching that at the beginning of January. So that's going to be going out, I think, this week. If not this week, then next week. This recording, we're recording it now on the 8th of January. We expect that we're probably going to release this one around the end of January. And I think we touched on some of the, in the first conversation with Sarah, we touched on some of the kind of New Year's resolution style things that you can try to do and how you should approach that. But I think what we're going to talk about with Sarah today is actually more things about how some more themes, wider themes, and maybe talk about how you can carry the healthy lifestyle choices into, from not just from January, but into the rest of the year and in the years beyond. Sarah, first of all, how are you? Are you well? And have you had a good Christmas break?
Yes, thank you. It's lovely to be here. I am very well. I had a brilliant Christmas break. It was just lovely to stop and spend time with family. Yeah, so I'm refreshed and ready to go. Really excited about this year, actually. I've got so many exciting meetings in the diary and lots of plans and things afoot, which is great.
I imagine you've been very busy the last week or so with clients who are regretting some of their lifestyle choices over the Christmas and festive period. So I'm very appreciative of all the time that you're giving us, all of our viewers and listeners. I'm sure very grateful to be hearing from you again. Sarah, what's been the recurring themes of your clients that you've been having check-ins with over the last week or so? What are their concerns, and what are they, and what sort of consistent themes of advice that you're giving to them?
This is a brilliant time of year. Everyone wants to reset and reboot and start being more healthy. So it is a big boom time for me and clients, which is lovely. Mainly people are feeling a little bit regretful about what's happened over Christmas, wanting to reset, like I say, and reboot and restart. But I'm the sort of person that I don't want anyone to feel guilty or bad about whatever way they're treating their body, certainly not for long periods of time. But lots of people are feeling a bit disappointed. But I'm very much that positive person of don't give yourself a hard time. Tomorrow's a new day. My favourite day of the week is Monday because it does feel like a reset and it's the chance to sort of refocus. So lots of people feeling a little bit, like actually as we get older, we really need to look after our health more. There's lots in the press and like you were saying earlier, lots on social media, pushing home the point of health. And so people are feeling bad about it, but I'm most of my clients comment about how positive I am and how I don't sort of berate anyone or make anyone feel bad about where they're at. Because there's always tomorrow's always a new start and you can always move forward, even if it's just a tiny step.
Yeah, well, I mean, as expected, very clearly wise and well-intentioned words there from you, Sarah. I guess, as many of us, and myself included, we all go into January with the best intentions, and and for the most part, particularly I think the first 2/3 of January, we do tend to generally start to make good lifestyle choices. I think everyone's feeling a bit they've had a bit too much during the festive season, and I imagine there's also a financial implication, particularly when we're younger. You're broke from Christmas, aren't you, and all the festivities, and so you can't even afford to go out either. So everything is much more. I think people aren't very social and don't want to necessarily have big parties in that first half of January, or at least the first kind of 2-3 weeks, and then I suppose you get to the back end of January. There's that Burns night, particularly if you're in Scotland or in I think people in England are quite happy to celebrate Burns night if it gives them the opportunity to have some whiskey and haggis, and then I think and then I think a lot of those, the parties, the late nights, and that sort of thing, start to slip back in. And then I suppose we all naturally have a tendency to just slip back to the habits that we've formed over the past years and months preceding that. So what's your advice to your clients who've been looking to sort of they're looking to make changes, and they've got to the middle to back end of January, and then they're starting to see their old bad habits creeping back in? What's your general advice to them to be able to sort of maintain the progress that they've made up to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. One of the things as a health coach that I specialize in is behavior change. And so it is that long-term, full-on lifestyle change and adaptation. And that's where I think health coaches really help people, because we help people understand why they're doing a certain thing. Like, why do you have 10 pints on a Saturday, or why do you have 4 cocktails on a Thursday night, or whatever it is, or even the eating, late nights, whatever it is that you're doing that you don't want to do. So we help people unpick kind of why they're doing that, what are the reasons behind it. And so once you get to understand that makes it much easier, because you actually understand what complexities you have in place that are making you push towards that sort of behavior. So that's the first thing. So once my clients have started to understand, and because I work with clients on 12 to 15 different areas, so it might be movement, nutrition, sleep, stress, alcohol, every different area of health, then you're unpicking each one. And so I think when people want to make long-term changes, and then it does become more difficult. I run a program of about 12 weeks with a client, and about the 6th or 7th week, people are like, oh, this is hard, I want to stay motivated. And so we look at what their goals were in the initial stages, what their reasons behind improving their health were. Perhaps they've got a health issue, perhaps they want to live longer, perhaps they want to be, healthy to have more longevity or better mobility, whatever it is. And so you kind of make sure you know what your goals are in the first instance and your reasonings behind those goals, and then just keep on track with those. Make sure that things are measurable. Like, I love keeping track of workouts, keeping track of my body measurements, even people like to keep a list of like whether they're getting their 30 a week, their different vegetables and fruits. So all those things are measurable, and that gives you a little bit of a jolt and a bit of motivation every time you reach a goal, or you see your body changing, or you're waking up without a hangover. So whatever it is that you're wanting to do, you measure these things and keep yourselves accountable in that way.
How do you maintain the focus on measurement? Because I think that's one thing I tried to do for quite a long time last year. I was trying to sort of track a sort of personal marginal gains tracker across a number of different metrics. There's probably too many things. I was probably trying to track too many things, from bedtime, sleep, amount of time I was in a cold plunge, number of alcohol units. I think I almost was turning the tracking of things into a full-time job. Yeah. How do you simplify that tracking experience? Because one of the things I was looking to do, as for example, was I was almost trying to find ways of how do I automate that from find a tech solution so that I'm not having to manually input these things every day. Because I think if it's something that's like, for example, you talked about the 30 different fruits and veg a week. And obviously we'll talk about that. We'll talk about gut health in a moment, but and why that's important. But presumably it's not necessarily the most easy thing in the world to track on a consistent and regular basis. Or it's probably something you don't automatically do if you don't have for example, are there apps that you can use to track that, that sort of gamified, that help with that experience? Because I would imagine otherwise, if you're trying to sort of log it in a diary or a journal, that has more friction than if you're just signing in on an app that you're using on a regular basis.
I've got some clients that go literally above and beyond, and they're doing spreadsheets around their visceral fat and their subcutaneous fat, and they're keeping those measurements, and they're having to complete those and fill those out. And that is, for me, a little bit of a step too far, because then it becomes a chore in itself to keep the records. I don't know of an app that records that kind of thing for fruit and vegetables, but depending on what the client is trying to achieve, then we would put the small measurable steps in. So 1 week we would track the vegetables until it gets to be second nature. And you know that your focus is getting in your 30 a week, or your focus is reducing your meat, whatever your focus is. And it only has to be for a certain number of weeks that you actually concentrate on that. And then you can move on to the next one, or have a smaller number. Like, it does sound like if you've got sleep and stress and exercise and water and nutrition as well, that's a lot to cope with. But we tend to work in smaller steps with my clients to get them on track.
Yeah, I'll have to share with you quite as much as what I was tracking last year, but it just got too much. And in the end, I just sort of had to put my hands up in the air and go, look, this is not viable, not feasible. It doesn't mean that the habits and the behaviours weren't continued, but at the same time, I think that there's that. I think overwhelm is probably the right word. Is you can just get overwhelmed with the amount of data that you've got to record, remembering that we have businesses to run, or we have jobs, and we have families to engage with. We can't just be robots. But for those clients that you're doing this work with, and albeit you're tracking different metrics on different bases, how long do you think it takes before those kind of positive habits become ingrained? Like when do those habits become, I suppose, second nature to your clients?
Yeah. Well, I work with clients on a 12-week basis. And by that stage, you have put in some definitely improved strategies, and it becomes really much easier. The thing that I always remind people is to test things. So a lot of people talk about taking small steps, which I'm really behind. But actually, if you test certain things, like if you spent a week Monday to Friday and you cut out crisps, say you had crisps and sandwich every lunchtime, and you just cut those out. See how you feel by the Friday. See how you feel with an extra 10 minutes of exercise. And when you start to test those things just on a short-term basis, you'll see how much better you feel. And then it becomes so much easier to just carry on with those things, because you're like, oh, this has actually made me feel better. I'm sleeping better. I'm whatever the benefits are. And then it just becomes easier completely, because you've already installed the thing into your mindset.
Okay, so for you, it's almost like test things out on a short-term basis rather than actually, rather than saying, right, well, you need to do this consistently for 90 days so this becomes an ingrained habit. Okay, that's quite interesting. Crisps is quite an interesting one, because that's one of the things that I've started to do is, I'm going to start doing now is, I'm trying to almost completely eliminate processed food from my diet. I mean, it's probably not 7 days a week. Probably have a day off here and there, or maybe don't beat myself up if I have if I have one or two things a day that are more processed. And maybe you can talk to our listeners about this a bit more. I mean, a lot of the driver behind this, I've got the book here with me, which is, I don't know if you can see it. It's a relatively new book by Dr. Tim Spector, who's one of the founders of the Zoe app. And the book is called Why Almost Everything We've Been Told About Food Is Wrong. But him and I think a number of other sort of online gurus. I've recently discovered a former bodybuilding champion called Eddie Abu. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And he does these Instagram videos where he goes into Tesco's and other supermarkets. He's actually banned from, I think, a few Tesco's now, because he basically goes and he's holding these food items and goes, this food is fucking shit, and and they go and he's talking about how terrible these things are, but fundamentally what he's talking about is how ultra processed these foods are. That I think Tim Spector talks about it. Anything that contains more than 4 ingredients is considered to be an ultra processed food. Now, I had yesterday I had some tuna with some mayonnaise. I eat tuna mayonnaise with a bit of sriracha sauce in it. You know, the mayonnaise I think has 6 ingredients. The sriracha has about the same, maybe 1 or 2 more. I think you can, and the ingredients that they're in there, you can kind of allow it. You know, there's not too much preservatives and stabilizers, but something like crisps, obviously they've got way more ingredients. Having just come back from holiday in France, you know, you get bread from the bakery the next day. If you don't eat the bread that day or the next, or maybe within 24 hours, the bread's hard and stale. That's because they are really only using 3, 4, maybe 5 ingredients.
Absolutely.
Whereas you get the Hovis that we brought over from home with us a week later, is still edible, still soft, all the rest of it. Probably not even moldy, and it's just because it's got so many more ingredients and so much more processed.
Yes.
So for me, I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying to cut out the ultra processed food from my life. Presumably that's something that you're advocating for your clients, and you have been for some time. Can you talk through why that's important for people?
Absolutely. When I studied to be a health coach, processed food is so damaging to the body, and those chemicals and additives are just not anything that we need at all. And in several cases, they actually remove the good food and the nutrients to make it, like you say, bread is a really good example, to make it last longer. With healthy living, for me, I'm putting in as much healthful food as possible. So if I have a day where I perhaps don't eat so well, the next day, absolutely, I'm on 10 portions of veg, fruit, that kind of thing. So I really do work with clients. And one thing, I don't know if I touched on this last time, is that I'm helping people crowd out. And that's one of the strategies. So instead of feeling like you're feeling deprived, you're just crowding out the unhealthy food. So instead of the crisp, you'd have some beautiful fruit or a gorgeous salad, and you don't feel deprived. You feel like you've benefited from having something healthy, and you understand the nutrients are going to be doing some form of good to your body, and it just feels better. So I always work with clients not to feel deprived, to feel actually enlightened and inspired by food and the healthier foods.
Yeah, I mean, particularly the example you gave of having a bag of crisps at lunch, you know, that's something that I would routinely have, particularly when I'm say like I am today, working from home. You know, I'll have my sandwich, or I'll have a breadless sandwich. Mm-hmm. Then I'll have a bag of crisps. Then I'll have a couple of squares of dark chocolate, and then I'll have a double espresso. But I think sometimes I have the double espresso to go with the chocolate, or vice versa. Do you know what I mean? And so I've got that ingrained habit in my mind. Now today I just had. I had a great lunch. I had a 4-egg omelette. I had some kimchi. I had some avocado, and I had a couple of rashers of bacon, which are kind of processed, but it's still a whole food basically. It's and so from that perspective, I feel like that's a good lunch. However, I've got to the end of lunch, and I'm a bit like, something's missing, how do I, and I guess that's something that I imagine a lot of viewers and a lot of listeners will experience. And so it's like, how do you account for that? So what you're saying is that perhaps in addition to what I'd had, to replace, say, the crisps with a side salad, or I don't know, maybe even some carrot sticks or something along those lines, which would you've still got something to help you finish the meal, but it's something that is going to give you some macronutrients. It's going to help your gut health. It's not going to be, some ultra processed garbage that's going to be full of oils and, not necessarily healthy oils either, possibly sugars, additives that your body doesn't want or need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would have made sure, well, for me, that omelette would have been jam-packed of spinach and mushrooms and a couple of other veg that I could sneak in there, because that's going to give you the extra fibre that's going to fill you up alongside the protein. And so I would just be thinking, okay, what good stuff can I fit into this meal so that you don't feel deprived and you do feel full? So, like you say, some maybe you've had some avocado, but some crudité or some fruit afterwards, just to take the edge off if there is that sort of feeling. I'm just trying to think. I do a little recipe which is chickpeas with all different spices on. They're quite a good snack because that will give you the salty sort of crunchy thing. It's like finding alternatives, which is always really helpful.
So what would you do the chickpeas in something like an air fryer or something like that to kind of give them to get like that? Okay. Yeah.
With I would normally put some spices, maybe some garlic, a bit of oil and stuff, and just put them in the oven or on the air fryer for a sort of 5 or 10 minutes, and that is a sort of crunchy snack. Because sometimes when we do have that salty desire, we just need something to satiate it, and then you're golden. You're literally like, oh, that's good, I'm fine. I would also, if I was having a salad at lunch, I'm always putting seeds on top of those because that gives you a salty, crunchy little texture, or hemp, or just seeds of some type. You mentioned earlier something that you wanted to spice up, the sriracha. It's a nice sauce actually, but if I made some rainbow fritters recently for the family, and paprika, cayenne pepper, all of that will give you the same spice, but without the several sort of ingredients.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually taken to putting sriracha with my tuna mayo because it was about a third of the calories of the mayo, and yes. So when I'd normally, because obviously it's not quite wet enough, is it? If you just have one tin of tuna with 1 tablespoon of mayo, so I was like, so for me it was like a bit like a hack, but of course I was doing that because I was thinking about calories. I mean, there's now starting to be a lot of suggestions that actually looking at calories or looking at the calorific value, and actually Tim Spector's book says this, because a lot of the calorific values of foods are determined by the manufacturers of those foods themselves, i.e. you're putting the fox in charge of the hen house in many ways. Yes. Are you a subscriber to the law, the sort of, I suppose it's the laws of thermodynamics, but actually do you for the clients that you're looking to help lose weight, are you looking at calories as a metric, or actually are you much more focused on sort of macronutrients and the quality of what they're eating? Absolutely.
We don't really go down the calorie road because I think that's not really a positive place to be. Plus, if clients have disordered eating issues, that kind of thing, calories are triggering. I very much am taking the whole body, so looking at the movement, the sleep, because often women in later life, if we're not sleeping properly, that's really bad for our weight, and certainly weight loss. Movement, again, really important. Portion control is an area that I concentrate on. Like, some clients will text me pictures of their lunches and things, and most of the time we're eating way, way too much. There's an example I use of a recipe that was in an old cookbook from the sort of 1930s, and it used to feed about, I think it made like 16 brownies, and now it's a portion of 8 brownies, and it's just, everything is just massively bigger, and portions are extraordinarily large for what we really need. So back to basics, really. It doesn't have to be super complicated.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and the thing about portion size is quite a good one. One of my best friends from university, also called Mike or Michael, he had a reunion of him and his parents and his uncle and cousins, and they are traditionally big eaters and also very heavy drinkers as well. And I messaged him just after New Year, asked him how the reunion was, wished him Happy New Year, all the rest of it. And I said, and then I said, was it messy? Because traditionally it would have been kind of the quote unquote, sort of messy drinking. He said, no, it wasn't very messy. We just overate, and then he spent most of the night not being able to sleep due to indigestion, which then prompted the most boring middle-aged dad chat, where I recommended a new stomach acid relief called Nexium. He said, "Oh yeah, my friend just recommended that to me."
Oh gosh.
It's actually really tragic, but it's quite. But it just.
My clients have that really difficulty sleeping. They've either had too much sugar, they've eaten too late, their portions are too large, and can't sleep, or waking in the night, all that sort of thing. It just doesn't have to happen at all.
Well, let's talk about that, because actually something that I suffer with quite a lot is that, I would say probably 2 in every 14 nights I will suffer from quite disturbed sleep.
Yeah.
And it's, and I'm pretty conscious it's due to my, somewhere in my digestive system, things aren't going right.
Yeah.
So what can people do to, if people are suffering with that kind of sleep related disorder, I say disorder, but problem, what can people be doing to deal with that? Because presumably it's pretty well known fact, if you're not sleeping well, you're going to then not make the best health choices in terms of 100%. Food, diet and whatever the next day. Absolutely. There's a direct link with lack of sleep. It actually releases a chemical in our body that makes us hungry and makes us reach for the high fat and high sugar because we need the energy. So it's not even, people say to me, I'm just so starving for this. I'm like, it's not actually your fault. You just have followed the wrong basis. You've had a difficult night's sleep and now your body's just reaching for things. So people take it as they're a bad person or they're doing something wrong, but it's more our bodies are just sending out chemicals. So with sleep, if it's a food related issue rather than a stress related issue, or an alcohol related issue or a caffeine related issue, so many things that will keep you up. Definitely earlier food, so no later than sort of 6:30. Doing a little bit of movement, light stretching before bed often can get the gut sort of more relaxed. The normal things, perhaps shower or bath, that kind of thing, to get to bed in a more relaxed way. Make sure the lighting, just the normal sleep hygiene. But definitely for the gut issues, I would say eating earlier, having light meals, not heavy on the carbohydrates, which for me is with every meal. It's 50% vegetables, 25% carbohydrates and 25% proteins, and just keeping those carbs light. Keeping the carbs light. Okay, so I mean, where do you stand on something like pasta? Are you an advocate for pasta? I mean, I think it's probably something I'll probably be avoiding, based on what I'm trying to achieve with my own personal health goals. But where do you have is there a Sarah Stannard approved good carb, bad carb chart that we can talk about? Yeah,
I don't love all that heavy carb stuff, I must admit. I'm not a pasta lover, I'm not a risotto lover. I have rice if I have sushi, but I don't have a lot of that carbohydrate stuff. And if I do, well, I just don't. But for example, my little one, Henry, if I'm making him a pasta meal, he has a very small amount of pasta. Then it's massively packed in with vegetables. So you have spinach, peas, he likes mushrooms, all of this sort of thing. And then the protein. So the pasta is like an add-on rather than the focus, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's dropped in to the pasta meal as a little bit of a token thing, right? And it's always wholemeal, whole wheat pasta, never white, nasty, yucky stuff, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the things that I've struggled with my own kids is that, and the difficulty is that how harshly how harshly do you enforce this, because they're kids at the end of the day, and you want them to eat. They need to have energy. But particularly as I started to become more knowledgeable and more have a better understanding about diet, about insulin responses, the impact, the gut-brain axis. Yeah. I look at some of the stuff that my kids are eating, and and Andrea, my wife, she's very scientifically literate, and like myself, and she understands the theory of it, but at the same time, I guess there's a struggle, isn't there, to reconcile what's good for your kids and actually what they're going to eat, and try to find how do you find that happy medium between the two? Obviously, as someone who's been probably much more disciplined with your healthy eating habits, because of the health benefits you've seen over the past decade or so, you've probably brought Henry up with very good food habits from the start. But as someone who is who is known to frequent a Greg's every now and again, it's a little it's a little bit more difficult for me to do that.
And you're absolutely right. And children want to eat certain things that their friends are eating. We actually did a little experiment one day. Henry wanted to have a Kentucky Fried Chicken, which we never, ever, ever eat. And so I did an experiment at lunchtime. I think we had a chicken wrap with loads of cut up veg, like tiny veg in there. And then I think it had hummus in it. And I said, right, you have this and see how you feel. And he had that. It was like, this is lovely, mummy. And then we actually in the evening went and bought a tiny little kids meal, whatever it is, from Kentucky Fried Chicken, because I wanted him to see it and feel it and not be, told he can't have it. And afterwards he was like, oh, my tummy feels full. It's like bubbling. I don't feel great, And I was like, well, which one, honestly, did you feel better? And he was like, mummy, the one earlier in the day, I loved it. I felt good. I didn't feel full. My tummy didn't, bubble up and gurgle. So I'm very much a great believer in, not forcing Henry or my stepdaughter to eat anything, but kind of nudging them towards it in a healthy way, like try it, which is a bit like, testing out what works for you. You can't make a habit from day one, like totally lifestyle change. But if you try things and actually it feels better, then it's just a happy place to be, I think.
Yeah, look, I think that's a good. I think that's definitely a good suggestion. I think one of the difficulties is particularly as a parent, if the kids are used to having white pasta on a Wednesday with tomato sauce and cheese and and really with not a huge protein source alongside that, and not a huge veg source alongside that, and they're having the pizza on a Friday night, and whatever else they're being fed at school, too. That I know the kids at school, the kids at our kids' school have a meat-free Monday. My concern is that you have, we can debate the merits of meat-free Monday as to whether that'll have the environmental impact that people hope it will, or whether it will have the health impact that people hope it will. But the one thing, if they're doing a meat-free Monday, what are the kids substituting the meat or that protein source with? If they're substituting that protein source with more carbs and more processed food, then I really don't think that's the right thing to do. I really wouldn't advocate for that. So I think feeding kids is obviously a very challenging thing. But at the same time, I personally think it's really important to start educating children, especially as they get older, around making sure that their gut health and their metabolic health is in good order. Because what I don't want them to have is that, I personally have got a quite bad sugar addiction, which I'm hoping this month I'll be able to sort of wean myself off of. And I don't want them to have those, I suppose, develop the addictions and the bad habits that I've built over time. So that they, so that when they get to my age, that they aren't having, I mean, it's not like I have loads of health issues or anything like that, but, for starters, I've had 3-4 crowns. So my dental health isn't good, if nothing else. If nothing else has gone bad, but I think that's a precursor to much worse health down the line. If I don't start to make changes now, then I'm going to have problems. But I don't want that for my kids, especially kids that have got athletic potential, let's say. That would be the wrong thing for me to do.
I think it's a world of damage that we're doing to our children, if I'm honest. Like you on social media, having different things focused on you, I get a lot of content about sugar and about health, and we go to a children's party and there's a bag full of sugar at the end of it. We celebrate a birthday party and it's a massive sugared cake. I went to look at a school recently, and as a welcome for all the families, it was donuts and coffee. And I was like, gosh, surely these days we can get a little bit more towards a healthy flapjack or something. these are full on like Dunkin' Donuts practically that for the parents to eat. And I was like, how do we not know? How do they? We know this stuff, don't we? That actually that massive sugar is just not healthy. But yeah, it's just all around us and it's impossible to avoid. And you can only do so much with your children. And you can't ban them from eating certain things and make their life devoid of joy because, these things add joy to your life, unfortunately. But I just do my absolute best as far as just pushing in the good stuff when I can, which is why the bowl of pasta has wilted spinach and mushrooms. And actually, I made a meal for Henry recently, and he was like, Mum, where's the mushrooms? It doesn't taste so good without the mushrooms. I'm like, yes, like my work.
He's a man after my own heart, as a self-confessed mushroom lover. Yeah, that's. They can be quite Marmite, but for some people. But I've got to say, I'm a big fan, and so good on Henry. I mean, of our kids, Benji's definitely got the mushroom bug. I think the other two might take a little bit longer to get there.
Got to be said about mushrooms for the future, isn't there? Have you seen all the new studies around?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly stuff done by Michael Pollan as well, and not necessarily just the magic ones. Your run-of-the-mill mushrooms, I think, are getting a good rap. But just a point around sugar. So having just come back from France, from a skiing trip, it's a common observation I have when I'm in France, which is French people are not very fat. We counted on two fingers the number of fat actual French people who we felt were noticeably overweight, shall we say? And it sort of led me to question why that might be. And I think there's just generally a I think that, and I guess it all boils down to their diet. But one of the key things is that and I'm curious to get your take on it. I don't think that they have as much sugar, but also on the way home, we were listening to some French radio for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to the adverts and I understand a reasonable amount of French, and they were advertising Frangipan tarts from I don't know, Carrefour or one of the supermarkets. And then at the end of the advert, there was like a government kind of, how you have what we would have if you had a drink aware for an alcohol advert, they had that for sugar, which I thought was really interesting. That they're basically saying that you have to please make sure you limit your sugar and bad fat intake basically at the end of the advert. And I thought I wonder if that's something that we would benefit from in this country.
And I think education certainly could benefit us. I hate to get into the political side, but I don't think the governments of the UK particularly help us with knowing about nutrition and about health. I know the government recommended plate, which sort of advises you what you should and shouldn't eat, is just a bit is outdated.
Very outdated, yeah.
And that, to me, food is such an important part of our health, that should be like a constant focus, and there should be money spent on, like you say, advertising to say, this is too much sugar, be aware, that's too much, make sure you're exercising, all those things. It's so important.
Well, I guess we've mentioned ultra processed foods quite a few times. Josh, my middle son, he likes to eat Cheerios in the morning, and once upon a time I would have thought something like Cheerios or even the boring old original cornflakes was a healthy breakfast. Of course, the reality is that these are ultra processed foods and have got huge amounts of hidden sugars in them, and fundamentally aren't good for you. And which is not to pick on them, but I think a lot of government guidelines around health would have you believe that these are still healthy foods. And
100%.
do you also have issues with the labeling of some foods as healthy when they say it's low fat, but if it's low fat, then it generally means high sugar or high protein, which also means high sugar, or some other it's like protein bars, for example. It's like, well, if a client says, I'm just going to have a protein bar as a snack or as a lunch, does that do you sort of have to put your head in your hands and go, no, please don't do that?
To be honest, I'm very much a believer of whatever is the better option, just go for that. So if a client's saying to me, oh, I'm going to have a packet of crisps and a sandwich, I would sort of rather have some protein, even though on a low sugar one, than, the crisps and things like that, because that to me is just, there's no benefit of that. There's no actual nutrients. But I think you're right. The cereals are just, we don't have anything like that in our house. No cereals at all. John has a bit of granola, and we have porridge. That is it. We just don't do anything like that. And Henry's not had cereal for, I don't know, forever. And it's difficult because people just believe very easily, if it says this is good for you, then they go, okay, this is good for me. And that's not fair, I think, because people have got busy lives and other stuff to do. Rather than staring at the package contents, they just want an easy life and something to feed their children, which is healthy. And it's just not. And it's a big job to look through all of these details. And I had a client recently that was, what was he eating? Some sort of yogurt every day. And it was so full of sugar. And when we sat and talked about it, he was like, what? It's got 15 spoonfuls of sugar in some ridiculous amount. But it proclaimed that it was healthy. So it's a job in itself, working out what's healthy and what's not.
Could you give our listeners just an explanation as to why sugar and why these ultra processed foods are so bad for us? Because it's one thing me sort of going evangelical on it, but at the end of the day, I'm not the professional, you're the professional. Can you just explain to people why sugar and just ultra processed foods in general are why they're so bad for us?
Yeah, I think we touched on it slightly earlier, but the ultra processed, they're removing a lot of the times the good, healthy, nutritious aspect just to make it long lasting. They're certainly they're stripping it back, stripping back the fiber, stripping back all different types of nutrients, and adding things that we don't need, lots of chemicals, salts, heavy metals, all kind of things that your body just doesn't need in order to make it cheaply, make it easy to deliver to the client on a massive scale. And it's just a negative for our body on every scale. So there's too much bad stuff and not enough good stuff is a simple way. And it's that the thing you mentioned earlier, that if it's more than 4 ingredients, it really is ultra. So the way I work with clients is, if it's in its truest form, then that is actually food. If it comes in a package with a label written with several things on it, that's processed. So, and I'm the sort of person that I try and be as healthy as possible. I am not perfect by any way, shape or form, but I will do as best as I can every day to avoid the processed food and the high sugars and high fats, just because I know it's not going to do my body any good at all. So yeah, that's the simple way. There's much more complicated.
And what about sugar? What's the knowing a little bit about it myself,
Yeah.
And the damage it does to metabolic health. But how would you describe why sugar is such a bad thing in our foods?
Well, addictive is the first thing. Once you have sugar, you want more. With my clients, I work on a similar thing to the Zoe program, actually, but it's a blood sugar balancing formula, a way of eating. And sugar can cause inflammation in the body. And if we have inflammation in the body, that's going to cause disease. 70% of the world's diseases now and deaths are non-communicable. So those are the heart disease, the diabetes, the cancers, etc. Inflammation in your body causes those, and sugar is related to causing inflammation in the body. So it's very simple. It leads to ill health. So it's best to keep it at a minimum, to reduce it as much as possible. The formula that I have, and anyone who wants a copy of the blood sugar balancing formula that I have, I just sent it out to about, a whole group of my mailing list recently. It's a really simple document. It's a way of eating that's going to reduce the inflammation. It balances your mood. It keeps your weight steady, helps you function properly. And the reason behind that is if you have far too much sugar in your blood, then the inflammation is going to be caused, obviously, and you cannot burn that amount of sugar, so it's going to turn to fat. And if you don't have enough sugar, so you go the opposite way, this is when you feel lethargic, tired, and your body sends out the chemicals to find energy and find sugar. So you need to keep it on a balanced level, and that is whole foods, fruit and veg, high level proteins that are healthy. And yeah, so with my clients, we focus on blood sugar balancing. So it's exactly the same as the Zoe product, but we don't actually measure it. People measure their moods and the way they feel.
I've actually seen this week some backlash against the Zoe app or other forms of continuous glucose monitoring, particularly from sufferers of type 1 diabetes. Do you share their frustrations? There's and I say this, my mother has been a subscriber to Zoe for about the last 6 weeks. Yeah. Do you share their frustration, or do you think that they need to calm down a little bit?
Are they frustrated because there's no more blood sugar monitoring apps available in the country? They've all gone out of stock, I think, everywhere.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're frustrated or they're frustrated that people are focusing on the.
Yeah, I think their view is like, you don't need this. Why are you doing it? You know, that kind of thing. Okay. But do you see it as a good thing that people are taking this thing seriously? Or, I mean, or is it, at the end of the day, people will do it? Will it be a bit like, you know, the January diet fad, where people will do it for a couple of weeks, they'll make a couple of changes, and then they'll go back to their habitual lifestyles, you know, pretty shortly afterwards?
I think it definitely is a bit of a fad, but anything that helps us understand how our bodies work and how they work better with different actions, I think is a good thing. You know, there's quite a lot of data provided and information. So I haven't seen it myself. I've had some friends that have done it. But I think, you know, forearmed is forewarned. If you have this information, you're going to be much more well informed, not just standing in the checkout looking at Cheerios and going, oh, this will work. You know what I mean? You've got information that's going to be helpful. As far as I think, clients of mine that have used the blood sugar balancing, weight has dropped off, pains and stiffness and creaky joints, arthritis, all been reduced and improved, which is what you want. You want to find something that actually works with your body. I'm one of these people that if something doesn't, I'm not perfect health, but if I have something that feels incorrect in my body, I'm like, oh, what food can I have that's going to help this? Like, I was driving yesterday thinking, oh, my eyesight is definitely getting worse as I get older. I'm 51 now. And I was like, oh, I think blueberries are quite good for my eyes. And I remember these are quite good for my eyes. So I'm literally like, right, that's my focus, to have that thing that's going to improve that part of my body. Yeah. Because that's kind of the way I think. I'm like, you can improve your health by what you eat. So why wouldn't you choose an option that improves your body? Yeah,
I guess, yeah, you're obviously in a position where you are more informed than the average bear, shall we say? So as a consequence of that, it's more difficult for all the ordinary public, shall we say, to make those good choices or good decisions. But sure. I guess you're right, which is that if there's more services that are available to people that can give them that guidance, then that may be a positive thing. Yeah. And so, before Zoe, I know that there was, I think Science in Sport had released a continuous glucose monitor for endurance athletes. Mm-hmm. And for me, again, I think it's, if you're a high-end endurance athlete and you're looking to kind of, shave 5 minutes off your Ironman time or whatever, or half an hour off your Ironman time, and then that can help you time your feeding and stuff like that, then that's fair. That's fair enough as well. But I want to talk. You talked about the impact of of cutting out sugar and the benefits of it, and how people feel a lot better. I guess a lot of sort of autoimmune type conditions that will have been alleviated from that. Presumably certain forms of arthritis and gut issues. I've just lost my train of thought. Well, sorry, there we go. I'm back in the room. There you go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm back in the room. So, and one of the things that one of the types of diets that people have advocated for. I know that Deliciously Ella, I forget her real name, but she's obviously she has talked about how her autoimmune disease has been cured by going through veganism.
Yes.
That's not necessarily a lifestyle that with what I know, it's not necessarily a lifestyle I would advocate for and agree with. Going the completely opposite direction, you've got you've got a number of doctors who are going completely carnivore, and who are advocating for that as effectively as being very effective in dealing with a lot of autoimmune conditions in that respect.
Yes.
And obviously probably one of the more famous is someone like Paul Saladino. Where do you stand on those? Did you presumably I would have thought you'd be somewhere in the middle. You just kind of just be balanced. But what do you think about those kind of cutting out diets?
So I was plant-based for about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
Literally. And I had the odd bit of salmon, but I literally just lived on veg, and really enjoyed the benefits of that, really improved my own health. And then probably about a year ago, I kind of started adding a bit more meat into my diet. And I'm now, the pendulum is swinging back the other way, having just seen so much evidence about how animals are treated and the antibiotics they're given and the big breeding rooms they have for them and things. I'm just like, this is gross. So I do swing a little bit on that topic, because I do sometimes find it difficult to get the protein on a purely plant-based diet. But I definitely see the benefits of it, and it's one of those things I can see both sides of it. So yeah, I'm in the middle of swinging sort of both ways, but probably I would say my diet is 75% plant-based, really.
I think one of the challenges of plant-based eating is is sometimes the bioavailability of proteins and amino acids, which means that it's you probably struggle to completely cut out meat from your diet. For those people who are plant-based, I know a few vegans, and they're vegans for sort of ethical reasons, but the challenge is, I think, their own. Again, we can talk about the impact that I suppose that farming for vegan farming for vegan foods has in terms of insects and biodiversity, but that's a different conversation. But one of the things that they say is, they've said is, I'm a junk food vegan. Basically, they're sort of like, and so they're vegan, but the food that they're eating is, it's ultra processed and I guess taking that to its extreme is the sort of the Impossible Burgers and Beyond Meat type situations, which is just, it's just poison wrapped up in a burger patty, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the difficulty. That's where I found it difficult, actually, because my diet was heading towards eating more of the process, and I was like, that is not what I want. But you can find the proteins, in other ways: tofu, chickpeas, lentils, all that sort of thing. But it's not as easy as it is just buying, a piece of chicken or a steak or whatever. It's definitely not. You do have to think about it more. But I don't know if you've seen the new Netflix documentary, have you? That's out. What we are.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah. It's a really interesting study because it's twins. So they have about 5 twins, and they do this 8-week thing where they're doing 8 weeks of plant-based and 8 weeks of carnivore, and the study shows how they both are after 8 weeks. And I have yet to watch the end of it, but I have a feeling I know how it ends. And just talking about the way that meat is processed and grown and all that sort of thing, which is quite off-putting. but there's arguments on both sides, isn't there? Like you say, there's a doctor that I follow, and he's very much like, eat your eggs, eat your meat, eat this, eat that. And I do subscribe to some of that. But at the same time, I think where I've landed, actually, and it's only really over the Christmas period that I've been sort of on this pendulum, is that it's about 75% plant-based, and my focus is on plants and, veg and fruit, and then supplemented by some meat. And that's the way for me. Plant-based is a bit like water-based paint. It's not water, it's based around water. So my diet is based around plants, not entirely plant-based.
Yeah, well, I think that's ultimately a pretty good gauge. And I think that some people might go a little bit more, they might move the pendulum a little bit more towards the meat side, and some people might go a little bit more towards the plant side. I guess what you'd advocate for is more generally, just as long as you're eating real foods, not processed foods.
Yes.
Where you are on that pendulum, provided you're not, you're not missing out on certain key macronutrients or micronutrients, it doesn't really matter too much where you sit on that scale.
It's a personal thing, but I think, like you say, avoiding the high fat, high sugar, high salt, processed food. We don't eat too much of it at home. Actually, I cook quite a lot. I'll also just bulk cook, like lasagnas or my rainbow fritters I did recently. I try and make as many as possible so I can freeze some of them, but they generally get eaten quite quickly.
Yeah, I mean, but I wanted to just touch on your touch on something there, because you talked about animal welfare and and how how animals are raised together. So my brother, who's a fair bit older than me, he's a farmer in northeast Scotland. He farms a number of things, but him and my nephew, they're both called John. There's about 8 generations of Johns. He and my nephew, they are raising a specific type of cattle called a stabilizer. Okay. And the thing about the thing that's quite interesting about stabilizer is that the stabilizer breed, it gets to full maturity within about 14 or 15 months. So for meat cattle or beef cattle, that's a lot faster than it would take to rear other forms of cattle, which means that you can. Effectively, it's a much more sustainable breed for the future, and you can generate a lot more kilograms per of animal per per hectare than for other breeds, meaning that you aren't as reliant on grain feeding or grain finishing, because you can they can be purely grass-fed animals. And it's quite interesting that I think that with more investment into these types of breeds for the various meat industries, we can probably see a more sustainable meat industry emerging as a consequence of that.
I'd like to think that, but I don't know. I mean,
yeah, you'd be right to be skeptical, Sarah. You'd be right to be skeptical. But I think it's quite interesting that there will be other sides to that from an agricultural point of view. There's certainly ways around it. I mean, just in terms of sort of staying on the wagon, it's often triggers, isn't there, that kind of make us fall off a health wagon. Despite despite being in France and actually eating quite well, eating reasonably healthily. Okay, we're having some red wine with dinner, but we weren't really eating a lot of ultra processed foods while we were away. We then did a 12-hour journey back home, and French service station food or service station food options are not really comparable with what French food is on offer. So it's nasty preservative laden white bread, sandwich fillings which aren't very good, crisps, chocolate, sodas, all that kind of garbage, and then we get home and we have the Burger King, because that's what the kids want after a long drive, and who are we to argue with them? That to me feels like a real trigger for if you've been having good eating habits, you then get to the end of January, let's say, and you then have, you have that food binge, you have that drinking binge.
Yeah.
That surely that can be the spark or the trigger for the sort of the downward slope or downward spiral in healthy living behaviors, and get you back into your bad old habits. How does one? How do you advise your clients when they've had that kind of slip?
Yeah, that happens a lot, actually. Clients will just say, "Oh, I didn't have time. I didn't have time to plan. I was on this long journey. It was generally a service station." Those sorts of things that are really difficult to manage. With clients, I'm trying to help them in the first instance with pre-planning. So if that would have been our family, or I'm trying to advise a client, we would try and do something before we got into that car journey and find a way of some snacks along the way that are going to be healthier. But once you have made those choices that are invariably difficult, then just not to give yourself a hard time and realize that actually there's just a small, area that you've gone off piste, but now you can get back on track very easily, and not to give yourself a hard time. I mean, it's one of those things, if the children have some, takeaway food just because you're tired, you're just wanting to get home, whatever it is, but not to give yourself a hard time and just get back on track the following day, and realize that actually, probably none of that felt good and was great for your gut health as well. You probably didn't feel happy.
Do you know what's funny is I had I actually was so that was Saturday. Yesterday was I've got back into sort of my intermittent fasting, so I'm now sort of not eating until 2 o'clock or whatever, 1:30, 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
On any given day. So yesterday, I actually did sport in the morning, fasted. I don't think my sport was particularly good. I played tennis for a few hours in a competitive match, but I was definitely not at the top of my game. Conditions didn't help, but I also think that what I ate on Saturday didn't help. But then I ate pretty well yesterday in terms of, what I can very little by way of processed foods. Not none, but a little bit. Mm-hmm. This morning, and it's quite a consistent thing I have on a Monday morning, I felt, and no alcohol either. This morning I felt really kind of foggy and grotty. Is that the delayed effect of so it's not immediate? It's because I didn't feel that bad on Saturday, as it happens. Yeah,
well, there's like personal trainers or nutritionists will tell you it takes a couple of days for the food to get through the gut, and so it's making its way through your intestines, and not. It's not good nutritious food, so you're not getting any nutrients from anything. And so, no, you probably 24 hours, 48 hours rather later will be the effects of that.
Okay, because that's actually what's interesting about that is a quite a consistent theme I have on Mondays. Yeah. I often feel, particularly Monday morning, I've still got that sort of fog and now. But that's a consistent theme, I think, most Mondays that I experience. So is that a function of me paying for the Saturday cheat day every Monday morning, basically? Every Monday? Yeah,
do a Saturday non-cheat day.
Yeah.
And see how you feel.
See how I feel, yeah. Okay, that'll be interesting.
That's the thing. Honestly, it's so important to know that you don't have to just completely change your diet or everything on one day, because it's too difficult. So just do a test. I say to clients all the time, just if you have sandwich and crisps at lunch, don't do that tomorrow. Like today, have the omelette and things, and you must feel better this afternoon having had that nice clean lunch where you're.
Yeah. I'm feeling better. I'm still feeling a bit groggy, to be honest with you. But if you'd seen what I'd eaten, Sarah, I think you'd have cried. Genuinely, it was not. It was.
What you like with hydration and all those sorts of things? Are you quite on top of that?
I mean, I've had today good. Saturday, I don't think I drank a lot. I don't think I drank enough water either, actually.
Oh, that's another thing. Should be 2.5, 3 litres.
Of Diet Coke, yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. This is. I would be if I was your client, Sarah. You'd have me on the naughty step right now. So
those sort of things are so important. That the body, the water for our brain. We need hydration. So literally, the brain will not work properly without water. So you have to get that. If you've had a Saturday without, and then you've gone and done a load of sport, you're dehydrated probably.
Yeah, that's probably another thing that's going on there, isn't it? I guess the sort of the theme in terms of just allowing yourself, if you had a slip, just to acknowledge it and then get back on the horse sounds to me like a really good bit of advice. I think back to I had a really good streak going on Calm of consistent meditation, and I think I got up to like 210 days.
Wow.
And then my phone, the app crashed on my phone. I had to reinstall it, and I lost my streak, and I didn't meditate for about 6 months after that. So having gone for the best part of over 6 months of continuous meditation, it's like because I'd lost that streak, I was a bit like right. I was like, screw it, I'm not doing it anymore. And so I think it's that allowing yourself to be like, okay, I think if you're obsessive about streaks and keeping things going and expecting perfection, and then the minute you fail at something, you don't maintain that progress. It's about being kind enough. From my own personal experience, and I'd be interested to see if this is exactly what this sounds like you're advocating for. To say, okay, well, it doesn't matter. The streak doesn't matter. What matters is the behaviour.
Yeah, 100%.
Someone you and I both know has since the beginning of December has actually been completely teetotal, and when he was starting it, we were saying to him, I was kind of saying to him, look, don't obsess or don't focus on a target, just focus on just doing it for as many days as you can or as many days as you want to, and allow it, and just allow it to go through. I guess from how do you approach that? Well, someone who's wanting to give up or cut down alcohol or smoking, for example, how do you approach them when they do have a relapse? Like, what's their? Because I guess the difficulty for them will be when we're talking about food.
Yeah.
Good food makes you feel good. Bad food kind of makes you feel bad. But for someone whose neurochemistry is wired to seek nicotine,
yes,
you won't have that. So you won't have that positive reinforcing behavior. You won't have that positive feedback loop going on in the way that you would do for say food.
Absolutely. So with smoking, people have come to me to help them give up smoking. I've helped a few people, actually. It's interesting. And you're right, that reinforcement doesn't actually, they don't suddenly feel better in their gut and their serotonin levels, but they definitely will have some brain action going on in a positive way. They'll feel lighter in themselves. Their chest will feel better. They'll be breathing more easily. They can move more easily. So those things will definitely be coming into play. I had not a smoking thing, but recently talking about exercise, because my work has been so busy in the last quarter of this year, quarter of last year, like crazy busy. And I exercise regularly, and I found myself missing certain ones, having big gaps in time, and losing my streak, for example, like your meditation one, and thinking, oh my God, I haven't exercised, or I haven't done as much exercise. And so getting back to that is also quite hard to find the motivation. But with the smoking, and if you fall off the wagon, if you're not doing whatever it is you're trying to focus on doing, just again, really don't give yourself a hard time. Just start again, dust yourself off, as with everything in life, I believe. We all have to pick ourselves up from so many different situations, and to be positive and to know that if you don't do it, then you have no streak. Whereas if you do it, you have one day, which is better than nothing. So it's just a small sort of focus back into taking action. And even though, it can be hard to start again, you'll feel so much better straight away from whatever it is, the smoking, the non-drinking, exercising, all of those things.
And I guess one other thing that and I guess we probably can start to think about wrapping up, but one other thing I suppose to think about as something that can kind of take you off the wagon, that can derail you is we are in cold and flu season, right? So I guess it's very easy to allow you to tell yourself that white lie is, well, I've got a cold, feed a cold, starve a fever.
Yeah.
When a client's got a cold and they're not feeling very well, how do you approach how do you approach them in that circumstance? How do you stop them from making that bad, those bad decisions that they're very tempted to do because they're feeling tired and their willpower's under pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's, for example, food related, which is most likely to be the case, I'm very much like, people need to look after themselves, because otherwise you will not recover from your cold and flu, easily. So we go into a self-care mode, and we're focusing on like gratitude journaling, positive self-talk, getting our sleep in, doing whatever it is that they enjoy as far as relaxing is concerned, maybe reading or face packs or whatever it is that gives them back care on themselves. So we very much take our foot off the gas if someone's not well. And I had a client that had appendicitis recently, and he had a burst appendix actually. And it's quite a crazy story, because his doctor told him if he hadn't been in such good health, then he would have died. So the fact we'd been working together for almost a year, and he was in such good health that he literally lived, which was amazing. But on his recovery, we took our foot off the exercise and the focus on, building up muscle, and, he likes to do sporting events. So you just change your focus and give yourself the ability to recover.
Well, that's a really good suggestion there. Last question from me, and it's now back to my day job and away from your day job. You when we last had you on, you were talking about you were about to go to court, and you had a tenant that was going to be coming out of your out of the property, or you were going to apply for that.
Yes.
What was the outcome of the court hearing, Sarah?
Oh, it was, I drove to Margate. The tenant didn't turn up. The judge was not very impressed with that. So I was probably in the judge's chambers for about 90 seconds before he made a judgment and said he needs to leave. That was the 15th of December, actually. So he gave him 2 weeks, which I was a little bit surprised about. I thought he might have given him longer. And interestingly, he was supposed to move out on the 3rd of January, but he paid his rent on the 1st of January, and subsequently said that he hadn't received the letter from the court. So as of today, he still has not moved out. And I just advised him earlier, I said, you need to go this week, otherwise I'm going to have to arrange a bailiff. So it's still not quite sorted, but the judge has made the judgment in my favour, which is good. It was funny because I said to him on the day, I said, can I claim costs? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, the 5-hour journey, and the fact that my husband had to take the day off to do all the childcare, and the fact that I've lost a day's work. And he went, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it was a good idea to ask the question anyway. I guess maybe if we have you back on in later in the year, Sarah, we can get a further update on that and hear more about it. But I really hope that our listeners and viewers have enjoyed this conversation. They found it interesting. I think there's so many areas and avenues that we can explore in time, and if you're open to it, I'd love to have you back on, and we can focus on some specific areas. But otherwise, Sarah, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciated it. I look forward to seeing you in person soon. Could you remind our listeners and our viewers how they can get in touch with you, how whether they want to become clients, or they want to just follow you on various social media? What's the best way to get in touch?
So thank you. My website is sarahstannard.com. My Instagram is Sarah Stannard Health Coaching, and my LinkedIn is Sarah Stannard Health Coaching as well. So anyone that wants to follow me, that would be great. And I have some space for new clients, not a lot because it's a busy time of year, but it's been lovely to be here, Michael. It's been great to chat to you, and we definitely have a great conversation because we're both so interested in these health aspects, which I love. So it's been wonderful.
Yeah, we'll continue them offline. All right, Sarah, thanks very much, and
love to see you.
We look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, take care.
Thanks. Bye bye.